Building a great phone is tough, but building a great phone on a budget has got to be even tougher, and yet OnePlus has been trying this for years with honestly very good results. Now they've unleashed this, the new OnePlus 5, and it's taking aim at this year's current crop of excellent flagship Android smartphones. So, how does this next generation flagship killer stack up? Well, as you'd expect, pretty damn well. There are a few things you should know. First, I've been testing the top-of-the-line OnePlus 5 with 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage. This model will set you back $540, but that seems pretty reasonable considering the level of performance you get. There's also a version with 6GB of RAM and 64GB of storage for $480, which is more in line with what recent OnePlus phones have cost. Oh, and one more thing, the base-level OnePlus only comes in gray, but this fancier version only comes in black. I know, I'm also super annoyed by this. Otherwise, these phones are identical. They both use the same Snapdragon 835 chipset with clock speeds that top out at 2.45 GHz, along with the same Adreno 540 GPU and 3300 mAh battery. They also share a 5.5-inch AMOLED screen running at 1080p, which happens to be the single most conservative thing about this phone. It's a no-nonsense screen that reproduces colors well and is plenty bright to read under the summer sun. You can change the color gamut to suit your taste if the default isn't your thing, but that's really it. It's a perfectly nice display that just won't blow anyone's mind. All of that fits really nicely inside the 5's anodized aluminum body, which happens to be the thinnest one OnePlus has ever used for a flagship phone. Not everyone will love the design though. It bears some similarities to the iPhone, though I find the comparisons pretty overblown. To me, it just comes off a little generic, which is kind of a shame considering how distinctive OnePlus devices used to look. That said, the fit and finish are impressive. This is an incredibly well-built device, and the gentle curve of the back makes it really comfortable to hold for long periods of time. As far as software is concerned, things haven't changed much since the days of the 3T. If you haven't used Oxygen before, it's best to think of it as stock Android Plus. It's based on Android 7.1.1 Nougat and basically adds some neat customization options. All of the usual tricks are back, like being able to fire up apps by drawing symbols on the screen and swiping into a shelf to quickly check the weather and leave yourself memos. There are some new touches though. There's a Do Not Disturb mode specifically for gaming, which automatically blocks notifications from rolling in when you're mid-match. More useful for me was a reading mode that makes the screen go grayscale when you launch certain apps like Kindle or the New York Times. It probably won't replace my e-reader, but I sort of fell in love with it when I was reading in bed at night. There's also a secure box for storing sensitive files and apps from prying eyes, which I'm sure some of you will be very pleased about. Beyond that, most of the changes are pretty subtle. You can customize how the phone vibrates more specifically now, and the included night mode can be set to activate by itself. Strange thing is, my phone was supposed to come with Google Assistant on board, but it didn't. OnePlus says this was a mistake, and I was eventually able to confirm that Assistant works just fine on the OnePlus 5. Hopefully, this is not something you have to worry about. And then there's the camera, or cameras, I should say. This is the first OnePlus phone to use a dual camera setup, and it's actually very good. Most of the time you'll be using the 16-megapixel main camera, which stacks up very well against devices like the Galaxy S8. Photos taken with the OnePlus 5 are generally a little darker than S8 shots, but often pick up little details that Samsung's generally excellent sensor tends to miss. Otherwise, this main sensor focuses incredibly quickly and works decently well in low light. Photos taken in dim conditions were actually brighter than I expected, but exhibited soft edges and some indistinct textures. Having another separate 20-megapixel telephoto camera to switch into is very helpful, and it's kind of surprising and nice to see OnePlus use a higher resolution sensor for this zoom camera. Color saturation and detail are very nice here as well, to the point where I sometimes preferred shooting in 2x mode. Both of these cameras are used for the depth effect mode, which adds a bunch of bokeh behind your subject. It can be a little finicky sometimes because it requires a decent amount of light to work well, but I ultimately found it more flexible than the iPhone 7 Plus because it works nicely on things besides faces. Throw in an excellent pro mode and you've got what feels like the best camera experience OnePlus has ever delivered. As you'd expect, this combination of parts makes for some seriously impressive performance. It's actually weird how effortless doing things on this phone feels. Multitasking and high-end games proved to be no problem for this thing, and it absolutely smoked the rest of this year's flagships in our suite of benchmark tests. Long story short, this thing just flies. Battery life was also quite good. I routinely got a full day and a half out of the OnePlus 5, which is a little better than I did with its immediate predecessor. Curiously, it wasn't quite as good as the 3T in our standard video rundown test. The phone lasted for just over 15 hours compared to just over 16 on the 3T. All told, it's very hard not to like the OnePlus 5. It's blazingly fast with a surprisingly good camera and solid battery life. Its software leaves Android mostly alone, and the price tag means true flagship power is within your reach without destroying your wallet. Is it perfect? No. But building a phone like this is an exercise in compromise, and the balance that OnePlus has struck between form and functionality and price is just excellent.